Hi, I'm Michelle from Blumella and I'm back with Bloom in 5, and today we are painting 5 wildflowers. So if you would like to see how I painted these, then let's get started. We're getting straight into things today with wildflowers, and we are starting with cornflowers, which are super pretty flowers. Starting with a cyan, you can see we're just dragging that colour down. We're using our Caran d'Arche palette, and I'm using my Artify brushes. I normally alternate between the 8 and the 4 size, just using the green, some really nice sap green, and that bled so prettily into the flowers. We're going to wait for that to dry before finishing that one and just adding some little leaves. And then moving on to this inspired flower, I'm not particularly using any flowers in mind. I'm just creating wildflowers. I've had a quick look at wildflowers and I've just created some really pretty ones that I thought sort of represent wildflowers. Like these are like foxgloves, kind of like hollyhock type flowers. So I'm just using the yellow to stipple, and I'm using the green, and I'm putting a little bit of green in the flower where the stem actually goes through the buds of the flowers, the tiny little flowers that are within them, and then adding some more smaller leaves as you move up the plant with that sort of sap green, and adding some of that camo green as well to the sides of the petals to create them a little bit more 3D. Adding some more like yellow ochre and tan to the flowers as well, and adding some smaller dots and larger dots to make it seem more varied. And then I wanted to do just like a leaf branch almost, so I'm using that green, and it's an interesting way of showing you how I paint my leaves, of starting with the tip, using the body of the brush to really push down, and then end with the tip, and it creates like really pretty leaf shapes. As you can see, I'm using different variations of this technique and going in with some darker colours to let that bleed into the leaves. Using some really nice darker olive greens and some camo greens and some nice grass greens. Those variations add a bit more interest. What I like to do as well is sometimes add like a really deep blue to my green. I haven't on this one, but I'm sure in other tutorial videos I will show you how I add some really nice like deep blue greens, and that really makes the leaves pop. Moving on to flower number 4, starting off with a really nice yellow, bright yellow centre, and then mixing together some damson purples, and using like a blue and a red to make a really nice purple colour from the palette, and just bringing those petals from the outward in, using variations of the pink and the purple to add a bit more interest, adding a little bit more pigment in some areas, having some lighter areas. This makes it appear, even though we're not doing hyper realistic flowers, this creates a lot more of a realistic rather than a very flat boring 2D flower. As you can see, we've got some really nice mix of colours across the petals, and then using a real nice dark sap green colour added, like it's a lot more olive, and painting those leaves right down towards the centre with a very soft brush stroke. And then I'm adding some darker sort of damson purple to the brush again, and just dotting around on the edge of those flowers so it bleeds towards the centre without overwhelming the centre. And then for the 5th flower, I decided to do some really sweet little buttercups, just to add a variety of the flowers that we've done. So these are going to be like individual little flowers. So I'm starting off with my smaller brush and just painting some rounded petals in different directions. So we've got like a full-on flower, and then we've got a flower facing away, another full-on flower as well, and then doing a smaller flower at the bottom. I'm just conscious of not trying to get my hand in the way of the flowers while painting because of the camera. So as you can see, I'm putting my hand in some awkward positions just so you can visually see what I'm doing with the brush. And then very delicately using the tip of the brush, I'm just pulling down that nice green, quite a fresh grass green, and using some of the details to create those buttercup type little stems that come off, those little stalks and leaves. And then just using more little strokes to create other little areas for flowers as well. So it's a really pretty yellow colour, and adding those ochres for the centre as well, and then just using that darker colour to create like another little flower coming off in the corner. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of darker browns and greens to add a variation in the buttercup, in the stems, in the little leaves that are coming off as well, again to make it seem more interesting and realistic, of course, and not appear too flat. and then adding a little bit more of the darker brown, just a tiny little bit to the middle, which will bleed out. You don't want to overwhelm the center of the flowers with too much of a dark color, because you do need to allow for the bleeding of the paint. So always start with less, and then if you need to add more, you can. Now the original cornflower is dried. We're adding a little bit more of the darker color over the top to represent some of those more detailed smaller leaves, petals, sorry, and then adding some more color to the leaves as well, some of those darker shades, and just layering up the color, and then adding some more definition to our yellow flower, and some more definition as well to the leaves, to add a little bit of like shadowing and a little bit of shape to them, a little bit of those center veins, which seems to add a little bit more detail to them. You can just leave them as they are if you want more of a loose effect, or if you want a bit more of the detail added, you can add some like longer strokes and some thinner, more detailed strokes. They don't need to be lined up. You can have them broken, which seems really interesting as well to add that effect. And then we're just adding a little bit more of that olive darker green to the leaves on the purple flower, and added a little bit of a darker central shadow underneath, and some more definition on the petals. And then also with the buttercups, just adding a few little brown lines here and there and blending them out, just to add a bit more interest and a bit more detail without being too OTT and making them hyper realistic or anything like that. But I really hope you enjoyed painting these wildflowers with me. It was absolutely great fun painting them and revisiting this, and I really hope you join me in my next video. Thank you so much for joining me.